Are there any questions from one of the more specialists in this investigation field? For example, Marijke or Danielle.
Yeah, I raised my hand, but Kevin also raised his hand.
Okay,
so
yeah.
maybe Kevin first.
Okay, let's Kevin, please.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. I'm very disturbed at your dismissal of the Hawthorne effect at the beginning of the piece. I think that it's not something that can be dismissed and ignored in that way. Also, one of the things you said was slightly contradictory, because you said the Hawthorne effect was about the fact that people being involved in experiments gives them a positive outlook on things. And then you dismissed the fact that people who were involved in the experiment just by filling in the forms, the research bit of it, would feel automatically, neglected or negative about it. Those two statements are somewhat contradictory. And apart from that, I mean, I think the Hawthorne effect is important, because the thing that came out of that more than anything else was that in order to understand the real effectiveness of these things, they have to be carried out on a much longer time scale. Because in the Hawthorne experiments, what happened was after about 2 to 3 weeks, then they started getting clean results because people were now used to the new situation. Obviously, the scale of this experiment is not quite the scale of the Hawthorne experiments as yet, but I think that there needs to be some more work done on understanding the background to the positives and negatives of the workplace light. The other thing that slightly concerns me about where you are with it at the moment is that, if I understand rightly, the majority of the users of this were voluntary users who were already pre-knowledgeable about or to some extent pre-knowledgeable about the effects of this approach to lighting. I don't know what we can do with subsequent experiments that can actually solve some of those problems and clean up or clarify the outcomes.
Can I answer the second one,
Sure.
Kevin? Then I'll leave the first one with some trepidation to Peter. From the participants, 1/3 were not in lighting, including a couple that weren't even in lighting companies, nothing to do with lighting whatsoever. So I tried with the lighting companies to have not lighting designers, but let's say office managers, people like that. So 1/3 were not directly involved with lighting. And from those, I think at least 4 not even in lighting companies. Your first question, Peter.
Okay, so once we start diving into things like the Hawthorne effect, it gets very, very complicated. The problem also is that part of the perceived wisdom of the Hawthorne effect is at least apocryphal. And it's sort of become, if you like, the Hawthorne effect has become a legend in of failure in environmental psychology over the years, and it's what we all hold up. However, the critical thing for me in the design of this experiment was to try to cancel out as many of the possible sources of things that would go wrong. I was trying to make it as much like a medical double-blind trial as I could. So in the medical double-blind trial, you would expect half the population to get a dose of something real, and the other half of the population to get a dose of effectively a placebo. Now, getting a placebo with a light is really difficult. Yeah, you either have a light or you don't. Yes, so how do I hide that away? And so what we found, the best solution we could get was this luminance difference, which we stretched as far as we could without being perceptually different. Mm-hmm. So that was our objective in this. And so we were not comparing absolute results, we were comparing relatives so that we knew we get a certain result when you're on the lower dose, a certain result when you're on the higher dose. And that gave us some findings, and to a certain extent, that cancelled out a lot of the things that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
However,
may I interrupt here, because otherwise we will run out of time. 5 o'clock is our deadline.
yeah,
And there are 2 other hands raised.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to have a short question and a short answer. And of course, afterwards there can always be lateral further
Yeah.
detailed discussions I
absolutely.
propose. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If Kevin
Yeah.
wants to give me a call, that's fine.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Dan,
we can chat about
Danielle.
it later.
Yeah.
Daniel Bachman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually Joachim, not myself. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Joachim. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. Sort of very interesting. I was wondering whether you sort of had noted sort of the age of the or the age range of your participants and potentially their chronotypes. You mentioned chronotypes in your first presentation. And then whether you actually sort of did a visual acuity and ECR color sort of, so you could basically baseline some of your participants, because you might not know whether you have extreme chronotypes or whether you have color blindness or worse visual acuity, and that might actually tie into why you have the results that you have. And then the other thing is that I could see that you hadn't done a power analysis. So basically, it's sort of, yeah, it's quite subjective data. And then last but not least, whether you have insight into what they were exposed to after they left work, because that might actually have potentially quite a huge amount of impact on all your sort of sleep studies or questionnaires.
I can answer part of this in terms of what they did after work or before work. Indeed, this is what I tried to encompass in my cooking pot analogy. So we just couldn't isolate all these variables, nor wanted to try. In terms of this presentation, we shoehorned a lot to fit into a short time frame. I can give Jan, who can circulate the details. But to answer your question, half were, there's exact split between male and female. Half were 20 to 40, and sorry, 20 to 30, and the other half 30 to 40. Then there was a few 40 to 60. And yes, there was some screening to make certain that they weren't on medication, or that they didn't have color blindness, or about 6 or 7 different questions. So it wasn't totally that we didn't isolate for these things.
Okay.
Also, by the way, we checked that the offices weren't bathed in sunlight, or maybe one was 3000 Kelvin. Well, that would have been too different to the 4000 Kelvin, so we crossed that one off. So it wasn't totally the Wild West. There was some thought that went into yeah, and I'm happy to send to you a more detailed presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Marijke, do you still? No, I think Marijke, you also want to postpone your question. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, we can discuss afterwards. I have some interesting questions as well, especially maybe a very short one. You now mentioned you have women and men, and it's known that there are some differences in how comfortable people find certain colors between men and women. Have you seen any difference between men and women?
The answer to that is no. And the reason is that once we break the sample down into 2 samples of 15, I don't like the statistics anymore. It's just too thin, the data. What we need to do is for all of you to get together, and we'll do this not with 30 subjects, but 300.
Yeah.
I should say the research is continuing as we speak in Scandinavia with a new set of participants.
Okay,
Good
great.
luck.
Yeah.
I think it's a very elegant setup. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot. I want to close this. If people are more interested in this experiment, please reach out. I think the easiest way is to Roger. Yeah, contact Roger. Roger dave.sexton@goodlightgroup.org, and he will then see if it's needed to have a separate webinar on this for more detail or handles those questions bilateral. With that, I thank you all for your kind attention. I think it was a lively discussion at the end, and we had a lot of serious input. And hopefully, Dave and company, you are successful with this product where you put so much effort and money in doing this research. And so good luck with it. Yeah. Thank you all very much. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.